with Jump, they sort of have this benefit of, this is, I think, one of the smartest high performance distributed engineering teams in the world. And they get to look at the Solana protocol and the implementation of the validator as it stands today, and basically rebuild it without having to make any of the, I'll say, constraints of operating in a production environment. And what they've been able to do is basically squeeze like 100x the performance out of the same hardware.
All right, just a quick one before we get started. So this podcast, as you know, informational and entertainment purposes only, certainly shouldn't be considered as financial advice. Please speak to a financial advisor or an expert before you make any investment decisions. Any investment decisions that you do make should be based on your own research and your own understanding of the risks involved. Ourselves, or the guests of the podcast, are certainly not financial experts and do not provide any investment advice. So that said, let's get on with the episode. Please give us a like, subscribe, help us grow, help us bring on some bigger and bigger guests. Yeah, let's get to it.
All right, we're recording. We got Dan, the executive director of the Solana Foundation and one of the elders, judging by your bio. Dan, how's it going? Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. Yeah, this is great. Happy to chat today.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, I've tried to plan as much as possible, but every time I plan, something else rolls out of the Solana camp and I find myself just stuck back at square one. So I can only imagine what it's been like on your end the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's been really exciting. There's a lot of things that have been coming down the line. A lot of really exciting announcements. Happy to dig into. And always like a number of things that often surprise us. Things that kind of come out of the community that maybe we weren't expecting or didn't know was coming. So in a lot of sense, it's sort of like we're on the same roller coaster in discovery as everybody else, which is really exciting, to see the Solana community kind of get to a point where they're taking so many things into their own hands, which was a different situation than a few years ago when the chain was less mature and we were kind of more directly involved in supporting some of our earlier launches and earlier projects, and now it's we're mostly hands off with a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So just before we get into it, can you just kind of give us just a bit of background on yourself and like what you kind of day to day and just your role and how you've found yourself like coming into the whole crypto Web3 space. So I'd love to kind of hear a little bit of background.
Sure. I can't say that I have a bio where I, bought my first Bitcoin in 2009 or anything like that. But I've been in the crypto space for about 5 years. And all of that has been as sort of I'll say a full-time member of the Solana community. So I was originally one of the early engineers at Solana Labs, which is the engineering firm that built the original Solana protocol and launched the Solana Network. Like many of the early Solana Labs engineers and all of these sort of technical founders of Solana, I used to work at Qualcomm as a radio engineer. So that's where Anatoly kind of cut his teeth as a younger engineer. Two of the technical co-founders from Solana Labs, a kind of whole cohort of almost all of the early technical hires came out of the Qualcomm community. Which has obviously a lot of expertise in distributed systems, which is where some of the early kind of innovation, inspiration, and learnings for the Solana tech came from. So I actually had the benefit of working with the original CTO of Solana Labs while we were coworkers at Qualcomm, and he took me out to lunch one day in 2018. And said, "Hey, I'm friends with this guy Anatoly. He's got this wacky idea in this crypto industry. We've got no idea if anything's going to work, but it's a moonshot, and we're just hiring a few people that we know and we trust. And do you want to get on board?" And at the time, I actually said no. I was I was really intrigued. A bit of a personal tangent. I was sort of in parallel chasing this personal pipe dream kind of bucket list item of mine. I actually wanted, I had just that same day that I had this early like Solana exploration conversation, I found out that I got another job that I had been looking to get for years, which was actually to go and work in Antarctica.
Oh shit!
So I was in the process of leaving Qualcomm to go. I actually ended up working at a research facility in Antarctica for 5 months as a radio technician. And that was a whole big chapter, a lot of fun, really wild experience. And I basically called him back up from Antarctica about, 4 out of the 5 months into my contract. And I was like, hey, do you guys still want to work together? I'm coming back to the States in a few months. Have you found that, that killer DevOps engineer yet? And they said no. So let's chat and, kind of pick that conversation, but right back up about 8 months later. So I ended up joining the Solana Labs team in early 2019. It was about a little under a year after kind of the founding round of Labs. So
what was built at that time? What was like?
What was built?
Where...
Well, we had let's see, in early 2019. This was well before mainnet. This was actually before we even had testnet running. So we had proof of history. We had a consensus algorithm built around proof of history. We had basic SOL transfers, but we didn't have the BPF runtime that supports all smart contracts and on-chain programs. We didn't have any of the SPL standards. We didn't have any tokens other than SOL. And this was still on testnet, right? So the mainnet didn't even exist. So still a lot of like the very early, I'll say core functions of the Solana networking protocol were like kind of in the early stage of development, right? Even Turbine, which is what we use to, send blocks or pieces of blocks across the network, was still under early development. And at the time we were just using Google Cloud and a lot of other, cloud providers to like spin up a handful of VMs, see if we can get this, a quick multi-node test running and see if we can do anything like the TPS that we think we can or that we ought to, and what keeps breaking. So a lot of my early work was actually focused on like building up this test infrastructure. Can we quickly and easily spin up test networks for internal performance work and, see basically what's broken today. And all of this was in the early days, just all in a virtual environment, on cloud VMs. So it's so much easier to spin up and tear down. Obviously the Solana network today, most of the nodes run on bare metal. A lot of people have run their Solana infrastructure in data centers. They have physical dedicated machines. And one of the really interesting projects that I got to participate in basically the summer of 2019 was the setting up of the very first like physical Solana validators, the very first bare metal validators. Proper startup style. We were working in the basement, at our founder's house. I got like a corporate card that I got to abuse and ordered like $10,000 worth of parts on Newegg and had it all shipped to his house. And just spent a couple weeks like just building these machines by hand. And we've got, I'm actually based in Colorado. We've got a location in a data center here in Denver that is home to the very first Solana, like this very first bare metal Solana validators that we hand built. We racked them by hand, hooked them up. And those were or I'll say some of the original nodes that we used to launch mainnet in early 2020, the following year. So that was
that'll
like,
be going in the Solana museum one day.
yeah. They're still running. They're still, we put green LEDs in all of them. It was, it was early days, right? Before Solana had the nice green, blue, purple gradient that we sort of rebranded to a few years ago. It was just this like nice neon green. So I made sure all the LEDs in these machines are green. But yeah, it's just been incredible to see, like, particularly having, physically kind of put my hands on the equipment that was the I'll say the origin of mainnet, and to see now, today we've got, there's 3,000 node operators or 3,000 nodes running, 40 different countries, hundreds and hundreds of individual locations all over the world in just over 3 years since we launched mainnet. It's just really exciting, really, really humbling.
Seeing it from the original getting built with your kind of bare hands and then seeing how it's being picked up and distributed across the planet is, man, that scared the shit out of me.
Yeah.
So what's a little bit more closer to present day? It's been a pretty rough 18 months across the board in the full industry and even further afield in wider macro markets and things like that. What's it been like kind of heads down throughout all that?
Yeah, it's been hard. There's no question about it. It's been a really, kind of tough extended chapter here. But we built Solana and launched Solana in basically like the depths of the bear coming out of like the 2018, 2019 cycle. And a lot of our like earliest builders that are still with us kind of like came through that gauntlet with us. And I feel like we're experiencing that now again, that it's a really hard market. Obviously a lot of numbers are down, but the people that are building on Solana today, the folks that stuck around, are the ones who understand that, really have the conviction in the Solana technology as really the option for a scalable blockchain platform where you can build world-class product. And what we're seeing are the launch of a lot of these use cases that are, to quote our new marketing campaign, only possible on Solana. When we're seeing people make this existential bet on crypto and making products that are uniquely enabled by a platform like Solana, these are folks that have to have conviction and see it through, and stick with us. And that's really been, I don't know, kind of like forging the community in fire, I'll say a little bit.
Yeah, pressure creates diamonds and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to ask you immediately because we're recording this on the 6th. So yesterday on the 5th of September, just out of nowhere, big announcement comes directly from Visa. And one of the main things that I like about this, I want you to kind of fill us in on your perspective and what the feeling in the camp is. But we're a kind of content platform media company, and we can kind of see through half-assed kind of BD deals that are quite clearly transparent sometimes, and it's very, very one-sided. And it's never like, let's say it's with Visa and they release, oh, so-and-so has just made a partnership with Visa, but it only comes out from the network or the L1 that's trying to kind of promote this for some. I don't know if it's like a vanity metric marketing push or whatever, but this comes directly from Visa, and obviously there's press release and everything that comes around it. But this isn't some sort of like touching the surface vanity marketing campaign. This is like really getting into the nitty gritty of actual use case of Solana and why, to use the marketing terminology, it's only possible on Solana. But I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts around it and kind of how it's led up to this point.
Yeah, it's super exciting, particularly I think, to your point, this is, as I see it and as we see it, potentially one of the, biggest announcements in crypto right now, one of the biggest announcements for Solana, to see, Visa is not some second tier or second size company by any stretch of the imagination, right? And this is really an example of, Visa exploring what technologies are going to enable their products, their set of services that very clearly have massive amounts of real world demand and real world adoption, right? I don't know of anybody who, might be watching this who's never used, Visa or services from Visa. And they see the promise of stable coins for a variety of applications and are looking at what are the platforms that can uniquely solve bottlenecks or inefficiencies in their business processes, right? And they, I believe spent many months looking at a lot of different options and chose Solana as the place to, continue to explore stablecoin payments.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's hilarious because I think one of my first reports on Solana, maybe over 2 or 3 years ago now, it was always comparing the throughput of Solana to Visa and MasterCard and all these other providers. But now but it is that point. It's the near zero cost of being able to send something in a near instant speed to anyone on the world at any time, like no kind of weekend, bank holidays, any of that kind of jargon. But it's like, but yeah, for me it was a big one, and a lot of people were kind of pleasantly surprised by it, and I think a lot of people can see this kind of like relationship developing in the long run because it just makes sense. If you ever use both of them, like I obviously haven't used it on a institutional scale or anything like that on what Visa are doing on their rails, but like if you just use Solana, it just makes complete sense for this to kind of flourish.
Yeah, and we've held for a long time that payments are, if not the killer use case, certainly one of a small number of massively disruptible use cases. And in this case, with the Visa announcement, their pilot is looking at interbank settlement, which is still beholden, presently to the same kind of settlement times, constrained to business hours, Monday through Friday, this kind of thing. And obviously with USDC settlement, particularly with any sort of transfer on Solana, you get near zero cost, near instant settlement, right? You get all of the great benefits of the Solana platform to do settlement between banks. And this could mean that banks could settle on a per transaction basis immediately rather than needing to wait to batch transactions midday or at the end of the day or at the end of the week. Could embed transaction metadata, it opens a lot more surface area for making a lot of their internal workflows much more efficient and much more effective. And
absolutely.
To your earlier point about, you always compared Solana to Visa. Visa, claims or Visa processes, I believe, by their publication, about 65,000 transactions per second. And that was particularly in the early days. And, one of our sort of benchmarks for comparison when we were, launching Solana and sort of promoting the, possibilities of this network. We look at a payments network like Visa, right? 65,000 transactions per second. Google search processes, I think, somewhere in that similar region, 60 to 70,000 searches per second, or somewhere. I don't know I have the exact number, but somewhere in that order of magnitude. And these are the kind of applications or use cases that Solana and the Solana technology is positioned to disrupt and compete at that scale, right? We're not here really competing for use cases in the hundreds of transactions per second, right? Solana wants to enable mass user adoption and things that could touch every internet connected person on Earth. And it's really the only place where you can build products or integrate services like Visa and VisaNet on a platform that scales like Solana.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting because there's obviously a big push happening across the full industry now for whether that be ease of onboarding, account abstraction, making kind of Web3 auth, like Google sign in for specific apps. And a lot of people are trying to, how do we stop just catering to the same basket of users effectively? But the the real issue is if you were to onboard 1 million users and everyone's kind of trying to perform the same transaction on specific networks that are available, it's like, would it even be like, what's the point? Because we're just going to end up stuck in the same situation where we were in the last bull market, where particularly on L1s, gas is like a ridiculously priced. It's going to happen. It's going to spill over to L2s as well. So it's all well and good as sorting our onboarding and all these fancy account abstraction, all the metrics to get consumer-facing apps on specific networks. But if it can't physically house the throughput and the amount of user transactions, then like what are we trying to achieve here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I really agree, and I think we're starting to see this now, where particularly with the rise of a lot of L2s and rollups and a lot of these other solutions, which are scaling solutions with all of their own design decisions and unique trade-offs. The one thing that we think Solana really brings to the table is, in addition to, yes, it's incredibly fast, it's incredibly cheap, it's a single unified global state, which means all these applications, all these users, and all these transactions can coexist on a single scalable platform, which means you can make a transaction in isolation, but you can also make calls to other programs. So you get the composability that we're always talking about, which can and will unlock really as yet undiscovered new use cases that are net new and really endemic and unique to the crypto landscape, that you can only get not just on a fast and cheap chain, but a fast, cheap, and composable chain where everything can coexist.
Yeah, it's so when I recently released, there's like a 32-page report on Solana that it took me way too long to release, and we were joking off that every time I try to finish it, there was something new that I undiscovered that had been getting built, or there'd been a new release, and then it got to the point where I just had to release it, and then it was like people were playing a trick on me, that as soon as I released it, there was like 4 announcements that came off the back of it, and I was just like someone's like having me over here, because there was just so much going on. But what really interested me, and not to get too technical for people who just want to kind of hear about some of the kind of partnerships and announcements kind of thing, but it was the main thing that I think really shone a light on Solana and its capabilities was the MadLads Mint, and how all the kind of technical implementation that came before that, with kind of isolated fee market and is it quick, and everything just kind of culminated together. And it was just, despite people's best attempt to try and like have one of the probably most hotly anticipated mints ever, the network did exactly as intended, and like it was kind of a real testament to what everything that had been built. So I thought that was like a point in time where there was like a real turning point of everything that had been built. But I don't know if there's anything like feelings from your side or any thoughts from your side around that point in time, and like the technical implementations that enabled that.
Yeah, that was a really great moment, the MadLads Mint. And one thing that I'll call out, which I think is not everybody realizes, the MadLads Mint, which was, I believe, in the mint in the immediate kind of following, the MadLads collection had the highest trading NFT volume anywhere in crypto. And that mint happened right in the middle of the Helium migration. I don't know if you're aware of this. The Helium Network decided over a number of months ago to migrate. They had been running their own L1, right? Helium is, I'd be happy to chat about this, right? It's a physical infrastructure network that allows people to deploy IoT sensors anywhere they want, and send and receive rewards for supplying internet IoT data and transfer data across the Helium network. The Helium had been running their own L1, and like many sort of projects that actually saw real adoption, realized that running a blockchain is really, really hard, and they wanted to focus on their product, the Helium network, not the Helium blockchain. And so they chose to migrate to Solana. They moved, they did a token migration. So all of this was going on. Helium was minting 700,000 compressed NFTs, each compressed NFT representing a single hotspot on the Helium network. All of this was going on, the entire program migration. And right in the middle of all that, we had this massive spike in traffic due to the MadLads Mint, right? Completely unrelated events. And the network didn't even skip a beat, right? You didn't even know that was happening. And a lot of people didn't, which was exactly the point, and really a great testament to the performance improvements that we made over the last 6 to 12 months, right? It's no secret that a year ago was a really rough time for Solana Network. We were challenging, like bumping up against a lot of these kind of engineering hurdles that we just hadn't run into, seeing as much traffic as we did, right? We're sort of like pushing the frontier of what a high performance blockchain could do, and finding out the hard way in a few instances for sure. And innovations like Quick, which manages sort of internet traffic flow control for people or clients that are sending transactions to the network, and local fee markets really helped and have continued to help drive like super stable performance. The network has had 100% uptime for the last 6 months. We've seen all sorts of traffic and volatility, and there really hasn't been a blip.
Mm-hmm. Can you just give us a high level of the local or isolated fee markets for someone who might have only operated in like an EVM environment or something?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so local fee markets is a really interesting innovation, and what this basically does is, I'll contrast this to EVM, where if you have a lot of traffic, or if you have a lot of demand for example, an NFT mint, there's a block wide market for what the fee is going to be. So what the gas fee might be. So if you are trying to send USDC through on an EVM platform, or if you're on ETH-L1, for example, and at the same time someone is doing a ton of ARB, or they're spamming an NFT mint, they're going to drive up the gas fees for anyone using that NFT mint, and for you doing something completely unrelated, because the block space in Ethereum is it's supply limited, right? You only get so many transactions in a block, you only get so many transactions per second, and people compete to fit all of these transactions into one time-bound area, regardless of what parts of the blockchain or what smart contracts they might be touching. Which is where you get people who have I just want to send $2 on the network and gas is $10. So why would I ever do that, right? It becomes completely uneconomical to use the chain during periods of demand unrelated to something you're doing. On Solana, we now have local fee markets, excuse me, which allow people to bid up a priority fee for a particular account that they want to access. So a particular NFT mint, or a particular market that someone wants to place a trade on, if you're doing token swaps or a purchase or anything. And only in that area of state where there's a lot of demand will we see a local fee potentially rise. And that will not impact the throughput or the fees on any other account or any other smart contract on Solana. So, for example, the MadLads NFT mint is a perfect example, where people were botting the NFT contract, people were bidding up the priority fee. Everyone was going like crazy. The network saw a tremendous amount of traffic. And at the same time, you have this Helium NFT mint, completely unrelated. Fees were unaffected, throughput was unaffected, the mint there. So you really can start to see, I'll say really orthogonal or completely separate use cases coexisting on the same infrastructure, on the same platform, without interfering with one another in both performance or economics.
Yeah, it's perfect. That's really well explained as well. But so stepping aside from that, we've obviously touched on Visa, but there was the announcement with Shopify. Is there any other kind of stuff that inside the camp that you guys are super excited about? Is there any specific dApps or any specific use cases? Are you seeing anything, maybe gaming, maybe social? Is there anything that you guys are, or even from a personal perspective, to be honest, is there anything that's like really piquing your interest?
I think the things that are particularly interesting to us are, like I said, the things that are only possible on Solana. It's more than just sort of the the marketing campaign, it really speaks to there are certain use cases that are uniquely enabled by crypto, and these are the things that I think are going to have long-term traction. If I just recreate a Web2 program and I put the word blockchain next to it, but it still uses all the same paradigms, it doesn't add new value to the end user, the customer, or the user. I think these are, I'll say, not ambitious enough kind of things. One of the use cases that I think is really exciting that we're seeing pop up is what we call DPIN, or decentralized physical infrastructure networks. These are physical networks that are sort of uniquely enabled by the payment and token flow and programmability of a platform like Solana. So I mentioned the Helium network earlier. There's also Hivemapper, which is a sort of street view mapping platform. It's effectively a competitor to Google Maps Street View. I believe they've mapped already 5 million kilometers of road globally. So you've got, they have a physical device like a little dash cam that their users or their drivers can mount in their vehicle as they're driving around doing their daily tasks, or particularly if they're like Uber, Lyft drivers, or delivery drivers that are going to be driving a lot of streets regardless.
Like
they can
crowdsourced. Yeah. Okay. Right. I get what
exactly. So that's right. It's crowdsourced street view mapping, where the drivers can earn tokenized rewards based on which streets that they're mapping, based on the demand to have an updated view of a certain street if something hasn't been updated in a while, or if something's never been mapped before. They can do sort of demand-based rewards, and sort of these kind of streaming token services that are really only possible on Solana. Really, really cool to see. There's also the Render network, which is doing GPU farming for sort of on-demand GPU services, where people can kind of farm that out using Solana. There's another project, the name escapes me right now, that's looking to provide credits for people who are providing battery storage harvested from solar or other sustainable use cases, and then can send and receive credits for storing electricity, storing clean electricity, and then sending it back out onto the grid during times of demand. And so it's very simple to sort of monitor and do token flows for something like this on a platform like Solana.
Yeah, it's impressive to see more, because I think sometimes, like, doing this all day, every day, I can't, personally, I get stuck in this kind of echo chamber and echo bubble of seeing like the same. My friend describes it as like the Taco Bell, like DeFi as Taco Bell, where there's like 8 ingredients and they just dollar up in a different way. So I'm really starting to get quite enthusiastic about stepping outside of that kind of bubble and tapping into kind of new use cases and actually getting out into the real world. I think if you thought back to kind of 2017 and like the ICO boom, yeah, there was a lot of like bad connotation, like Uber on the blockchain and like Dentacoin and all that kind of stuff. But not that was inherently bad. I think there was just more like the various actors around that time, like trying to leverage off the back of that. But any of those use cases that are going to connect into the real world now, I think we're kind of in a position where it's definitely possible. It's definitely feasible. And I think as you say, with Solana actually enabling kind of stuff like this, I'm cautiously optimistic about how that aspect plays out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're definitely starting to see, I think, kind of a new wave of innovative products. Even in the finance space, for example, Credix is a lending platform that is native to Solana. They launched a year or so ago, and this isn't just another DeFi borrow lend protocol. They're doing USDC stablecoin loans, but the loan issuance is actually to companies in emerging markets. So they're primarily focused on Latin America, where it can, a lot of companies or entrepreneurs or people that are trying to take out a business loan are often run into extremely high interest rates to take out a bank loan, often due to instability in the local currency or forex or sort of local government or monetary policy. And working with issuing banks in those local countries in emerging markets, people can get access to USDC loans that can then be resold on a secondary market on Solana, and get access to much more competitive interest rates. And so a platform like Credix can really help drive the growth, through debt and through lending to real people who want to start real companies in places where you have this developing economy, right? Regardless of the end use case. I mean, that's really a win-win for so many people.
Mm-hmm. Even on the flip side, there's so many people that I'd love a seamless way to just invest into emerging markets. It's like if you were to tell me now without using kind of crypto, without using Solana, without using USDC, go and invest in an emerging market business in Brazil, for example. Not a Scooby-Doo. I have no idea how that how am I gonna do that? Like absolutely no way. But how much are you guys leaning into Solana Pay, and have you seen any kind of good anecdotes or any kind of good evidence of that being kind of part and parcel of people's lives? Is that going to get ramped up, ramped down? Like what's the kind of lay of the land over there?
Yeah, Solana Pay is actually really exciting, and again comes back to payments as one possible, one of the killer use cases for Solana, right? Everybody buys and sells things and needs to settle their payments somehow, and doesn't want to, not everyone wants to carry cash around everywhere. So we recently announced the Solana Pay integration with Shopify. So this allows any merchant who has a Shopify account to accept payment using Solana Pay. So you can send and receive payments with USDC stablecoin, with no credit card fees. It's just a couple clicks on your Shopify account. So anyone who's got sort of that merchant portal on Shopify can quickly accept USDC payment and get instant settlement anytime someone wants to check out with that option. So this announcement just came out, I think, a week or so ago. I think we saw within a few hours, or maybe within 24 hours, 100 different merchants across Shopify that had immediately and already integrated the Solana Pay option, which was super exciting. I don't have the latest stat for 7 days in what kind of numbers we're seeing. But yeah, I think the Shopify announcement combined with yesterday's announcement from Visa that they're exploring USDC stablecoin for interbank settlement really speaks to the emergence of what could really absolutely be like a very seamless end-to-end suite of products that are all powered by Solana to enable fast and instant settlement on the back end. That makes everything more efficient. It means potentially significantly lower fees for merchants. It means lower cost for users. Merchants receive their funds using Solana Pay immediately. There's no waiting for 1 to 3 business days for your funds to clear. So merchants can receive their money and then go reinvest it or pay their employees or use the money immediately to go live your life.
Yeah, that's like this. I don't think people realize until you start selling a product online or have an e-commerce business or something, and then it's like 2-3%, isn't it, for Stripe? It can certainly add up if you're doing some serious volume. And again, if you are distributing worldwide as well, you're going to factor into the exchange rate there. As I say, if you're purchasing over a weekend, maybe it doesn't get filed until the Monday. So there's like immediate benefits. We're going to roll out the Blockmates merch store. So we'll integrate it 100%.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I think I'm not entirely sure what the fee is for Stripe, but on, I'll say, traditional credit card services, often the fee is somewhere between like 2 to 3%. And so particularly for point of sale, right? If you're an independent business owner, if you have a physical storefront, and most people pay with credit card, most retail, brick and mortar retail, they're making single digit margins, right? If your entire business margin is 5%, as an independent business owner, and part of that 5%, or even is including 2 or 3 percentage points that you pay on processing fees to your bank or to your credit card processor. If that goes to 0, which it does when you use Solana Pay, and Solana Pay is integratable at with point of sale as well, so you can just open Solana Pay, it displays a QR code on if you have a little iPad for people want to do credit card or tap to pay, or just creates a QR code, someone can scan it, send Solana Pay, you get your USDC immediately. If you knock 2 or 3 percentage points off of a single digit margin business, I mean, you could effectively double someone's margins, right? Almost immediately with no friction, and then they can go, reinvest all that money. I mean, that's potentially hugely disruptive.
Well, what's interesting is I live in Asia at the minute, and the idea of if you were to say to someone in the UK, the idea of scanning a QR code on your phone, that wouldn't necessarily be like a port of call at checkout. It's usually just tap or Apple Pay. But in Asia, literally everything is mobile first. Every payment is you see everyone scanning QR codes for dinner, even to the point where if you're checking out with a card machine, they can print out a bespoke QR code where you log onto your app and you pay for it that way. And I don't think a lot of the Western world truly appreciates how a lot of the people in the East actually operate, and the scope and the extent of and how big these kind of payment rails could actually be. So is it something that you guys think about? Obviously you've got Saga and kind of going mobile first that way. Is that leaning into more for payments to enable that, or is it more just trying to have your native operating system based on Solana?
Yeah, well, so a couple of things. I mean, one, there's nothing inherently limiting Solana Pay to QR codes. That was simply the first implementation of getting the transaction right. All you need is simply the transaction request details, and that can be transferred over any medium, right? You could do tap to pay or NFC or anything like that. All you need is to send to the user's phone, to their wallet, hey, request to send this much in this stable coin or whatever token you want to this address, right? And then it's a simple token transfer. As far as Saga goes, it's a stock Android operating system, or it has all of the core features of Android, right? So all Google services, Google Play, the Google Store, etc. And on top of that, it integrated some really unique features that devs can explore sort of the mobile landscape, right? The seed vault was one of them. So built into the phone, we have the what's called the secure enclave, or the secure element, excuse me, which can store the seed phrase in a way that is as secure as a traditional hardware wallet, for example. So you can get hardware wallet like security with mobile like convenience to be able to use that secure seed phrase to sign messages, to sign transactions where you are, right? The bet on mobile is that everybody lives their life through their phone, right? You make payments through your phone, you send, you do mobile banking, you do your messaging, you do your work, everything's on your mobile. So crypto needs to meet people where they are, particularly for a blockchain like Solana, which is designed to say, hey, anyone can use this for any reason because it's fast and cheap at any time. And for an application like payments, right? I've got my wallet, my credit card, and my phone with me at all times, so I can just pull it out, make a payment. So the bet there was really in, can we advance both the security and the user experience so that crypto can really enter sort of the mobile era? Because to date, the UX on mobile for crypto sucks. Right, I think there's no bones about it. I mean, honestly, if we're being completely honest, UX for most wallets, even on desktop for crypto is pretty atrocious. The kind of things we often get into our echo chamber. I think in this industry, so many things we take for granted. The number of clicks to connect a wallet, sign some bizarre looking indecipherable hash, click approve, click send, adjust the gas limit, and sometimes we can say, okay, well, this is just where we're at, but I want to see, 1 billion people using these technologies. And there's so much room for error. We've seen so many people, fall subject to, scams or mistakes of their own making because of sort of the complexities. And so there's like a really important balance to be had with UX driving appropriate and safe and sane user behavior so that people can use these things, feel comfortable, be safe and protected, not, accidentally rug themselves of their assets, and still be able to use their phone to go and live their life and use services that are built on these platforms that everyone is investing so much time and energy into.
100%. So just before we kind of wrap it up, how much can you tell me about Firedancer? Because a lot of people in block community community are very, very excited about it. Everyone's talking about it. How much can you tell us?
I am super excited about Firedancer. I've been working pretty closely with that team. I'm not in the nuts and bolts on the engineering side anymore. But yeah, Firedancer, I think, is going to be one of the most, I think it stands to bring like a massive step function improvement to the performance of the Solana network, both in terms of capacity and performance and stability. So what Firedancer is a new validator implementation. It's being built by the team at Jump Crypto. So Solana originally had a single validator implementation. It was the software built by the Solana Labs team. And the majority of the network still runs the Solana Labs validator today. The Jito team, which is some of the Solana OGs, built a version of the Solana Labs code base that's optimized for MEV. About a third of the network runs the Jito client today. So we already are starting to see some of this diversity and maturation of the number of people and the diverse interests that are driving the evolution of the protocol, which is really, really great to see. Jito is a fork of the Solana Labs code, so it's sort of a modified version of what Labs had already built. With Firedancer, they started from scratch. They're rewriting the entire client in C, so a completely different programming language, which means it's built with different compilers, different tool chains, and that diversity is a net benefit for the network. The chance of some low-level, critical bug being encountered in one client, the chance of that, bumping into that in a second client is particularly one written in a different language, which uses different memory structures and a lot of different mechanics under the hood at the machine level, is extremely, extremely low. So once we see Firedancer adoption, we're going to have that much greater safety guarantees, sort of at an existential level. But what Firedancer had the benefit of, which Solana Labs never had the benefit of, was like, with Labs, we launched the Solana network. We didn't have SPL token support. We didn't have smart contracts. There was a lot of features that were built in and added to the Solana Labs client, as the plane was in midair. And so there's, with any, fast moving startup or fast moving tech, there's some technical debt that gets accrued over time. And I think the Labs team has done an incredible job of, managing that and fixing things and adding improvements over time. With Jump, they sort of have this benefit of, this is, I think, one of the smartest high performance distributed engineering teams in the world. And they get to look at the Solana protocol and the implementation of the validator as it stands today, and basically rebuild it without having to make any of the, I'll say, constraints of operating in a production environment. And what they've been able to do is basically squeeze like 100x the performance out of the same hardware that a Solana validator runs today by optimizing all of this C code to take advantage of every optimal hardware configuration, from the way that memory is mapped in RAM, and the way that they do sort of shared resourcing and distributed across multiple cores, optimized at the NIC, at the network interface layer. So we're seeing like a single or double digit order of magnitude improvement on the same hardware that is on the same cost and the same kind of internet connection that production Solana validators are seeing today.
People might ask, is it necessary to get that extra level of throughput and performance when it's also already so kind of highly performant? And will validators still run both clients?
Yeah, great questions both. I think so. To your first question, yes. I think one, is it necessary to have more performance? Yes. And if nothing else, to have as much overhead as possible, right? Solana runs at whatever level of throughput it runs today, but if there's some use case that comes out in tomorrow or 6 months, or as soon as you think you've got enough announcements for the week, and the next thing comes out, right, that you got to add to your Twitter thread, if something comes out in 3 to 6 months, right, that all of a sudden is some massively disruptive hit, and we're seeing monster amount of transactions, or you've got multiple gigabits of sustained traffic being sent to Solana validators because of some, whether it's an NFT mint or some other hugely in demand event. It's not about we think, okay, if Firedancer can support say 1 million TPS, right? Do I think Solana is going to see 1 million sustained TPS in a month? No. But if there was such an event, right, you want to have the overhead, and you want to have as much as possible, so that when you put the pedal to the metal, the network doesn't even blink, right? And this is what we saw with MadLads. But how many people participated in the MadLads mint? Truly, I don't know, right? Maybe tens of thousands of people plus a whole lot of bots. Right? If you have some event going on that involves tens of millions of people, you just want to make sure that you have the infrastructure that immediately scales. To your question, would validators run both clients? Certainly as a fallback. Exactly what sort of a dual validator node might look like. We're still kind of exploring that, but one thing that I could see, for example, is a validator runs the Firedancer client as their primary software package, and so it handles incoming transactions, it validates them, it packs blocks, it submits votes, and it sends them out onto the network, the core functions that a validator does. And at the same time, on a separate process, or perhaps on an adjacent machine, runs I'll say a sub process of the Solana Labs code, which just does transaction verification, right? The primary thing we want to validate is that when you get a transaction in and the validator sends a block out, right, what happens in the middle is account balances change, account states change, right? You send me 5 USDC, so your balance goes down by 5, my balance goes up by 5, and I want to validate that when transaction in and block out, those what we call state transitions are correct, right? That's sort of the nightmare scenario that we always want to protect against, is an invalid state transition. And so if you have the Firedancer implementation doing one set of validation, and if you have the Labs implementation of the runtime, even if it isn't doing all of the extra overhead of all of the networking stuff, handling networking traffic, if it just still runs the transaction validation and makes sure that you've got the accounts, the correct account transitions, then you have these much higher safety guarantee. And if ever these two implementations produce different results, you can immediately raise a red flag and and detect a safety violation within the node.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, we're at the top of the hour. I don't want to take too much more of your time. You might have 10 million more announcements to bring out today. But thank you very much for taking the time out. And yeah, I look forward to seeing what's going to happen in the coming months. And whenever you guys want to come back, just say the word. We'd be more than happy to have you back on. And yeah, thanks again. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Right. Thanks a lot, everyone. We'll speak to you next time.